Good afternoon, all. Hope you're keeping safe in these stormy conditions. Pretty blustery out there, so we'll hope that we can get away without any power cuts or anything like that. But we'll keep it to the football. Dave Freezer here, alongside Paddy Davitt, to preview tomorrow's game against Liverpool at Anfield. Another of the Premier League big boys after that 4-0 defeat to Manchester City last weekend. And let's get straight to it, Pad. The big news: Dean Smith sort of took a deep breath as he delivered it, didn't he? He knew it was going to be a big one. It was going to get people talking. Idah out for the rest of the season.
Yeah, that's probably as bad as you would have feared when, obviously, Man City in post-match, it was soreness in the knee and the ankle. But then as the week develops, you get a sense, speaking to people inside the club, and, you can probably tell that it's not going to be good news. And, of course, yesterday Adam was there for us. I know it was the open part of the open training session, so to speak, but there was no Idah. So straight away, it's a layoff of some description. It's just how long. And, no issue with the ankle, but knee ligament damage requiring surgery, which he's undergone yesterday. I think he's just in the last few minutes gone to social media to thank everybody for the messages he's had, which I'm sure have been plentiful since that news broke 3-4 hours ago. So two things, isn't it? Stallard himself, terrible for him on a personal level, because really for the first time in his Norwich career, he had a Premier League opportunity. He got his first start under Dean Smith at West Ham recently, and then his first goal against Everton to cap an excellent performance. Hadn't quite hit those heights in the intervening games, but still, from now to the end of the season, in certain games against certain opponents, there's no doubt Idah would have been a major part of the jigsaw puzzle. So, on a personal level, horrendous timing for him. He'll have to go away and work hard in his rehab. I think they're already talking inside the club at pre-season now. That's the realistic target for him to get himself back fit and firing. And we, as much as he, would hope that's for a Premier League campaign. And that's the second part of this. It's now Dean Smith having to shuffle his options, as we said to him at the presser. If you look at it now, I mean, there's a huge over-reliance, if there wasn't already, but certainly now on Teemu Pukki. He has to stay fit and firing because I don't see goals anywhere else. The lack of striker options, it's probably reignited a debate about why they didn't do something in January. Jordan Hugill recalled from his West Brom loan, but then swiftly kicked in the direction of Cardiff. So, that's hindsight, and that's a wonderful thing to have a debate about. But ultimately, it is now Teemu Pukki, essentially, with, as probably will come to pass now, Josh Sargent slotting more into that central role if he wants to go into games, maybe not so much this weekend, but those big games to come against the teams in and around them, as he did against the Watfords and Evertons, and he was very proactive and on the front foot and wanted to carry that threat at the top end of the pitch. For me, it's pretty clear now, given the lack of other alternatives, it'll be Sargent slipping inside, and then there's now a slot opening up on the right side of that midfield, really, and Dean Smith more or less listed the runners and riders: Waheta, Zolis, Johnny Rowe, and even Kieran Dowell. So, that's very much where we're at now. But there is no doubt, bottom line, this is a big blow. Funny enough, it popped into my head about an hour after the presser. Different players, different eras, different times in their career, but we all remember back, and having spoken to him recently, we sort of relived it, the Tim Closer injury, and that was a knee ligament injury at Palace towards the end of that Premier League season, where things were looking encouraging, that Norwich could really take it to the wire, and then after that, things tailed off pretty alarmingly. Now, I'm not saying that Idah exerted maybe the influence that Tim Closer did on that Norwich collective, but just in terms of a player you wouldn't want to get injured, given where he was in terms of his trajectory, which was heading upwards. The timing is horrendous, but it is what it is. As Dean Smith also said, it's a contact sport, and with that, if you're a coach, you expect injuries to come along. It's just, obviously, you can't do anything about it, and it's just a terrible, terrible interlude, and doesn't improve their chances of staying up fundamentally.
No. Get your questions and comments in, whether you're watching on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube. We've already got a few coming in, and Craig Brown, as you can see there, has followed up on what Pad's saying. Idah being injured will be one of the reasons Norwich get relegated. Norwich don't have a target man like Idah who can hold the ball up should Dean Smith use one of the strikers from the academy. So, I mean, obviously, we've just talked about Josh Sargent there. He's going to have to become the Adam Idah now, isn't he? That we've all been talking about him looking better on the right, but Norwich going to need him if they want to play two up front now. And of course, he got those goals against Watford before sort of the frustrating couple of games out with illness. So it will be interesting to see how that develops. You would have thought in terms of the academy ones, maybe they'll bring Abu Kamara into it because that's basically the only other option they've got. But he didn't appear to be training with them this week. He's also had a very prolific one. But on the right, really, it's got to be about Jolis now, isn't it? He's just sort of in the background, not doing much. But if this lad with all the promise that we spoke about so much last year could all of a sudden turn up, then he's got that opportunity that Smith was talking about as well, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, as much as it's horrendous timing for Adam Idah and maybe more broadly Norwich, there's a player who came with a lot of fanfare, really announced his arrival in that League Cup tie against Bournemouth earlier in the season, 2 goals, 2 assists that night. And then he had, I think, an injury the following game in the Premier League a couple of days later. It was Leicester. He wasn't able to play. And you just think now, what if he hadn't been injured? Daniel had trusted him enough to give him either, if not a start, then a large portion of that Leicester game, and he'd carried on in the same vein. We don't know. We could now be looking back at, as we feel about Rashica and the impact he's beginning to exert. It might have been the same for Jolis. That's what it's all about. Grabbing your opportunity when it comes along, and hopefully, that opportunity isn't curtailed by, as it is with Adam, injury, and as it was at that point from Christos. He'd be the first to admit, when he has had subsequent opportunities, albeit limited, hasn't taken them. I only go back to the Charlton FA Cup tie. There was lower league opposition that day. He could have really put a marker down. I think he got hooked. I think it was half time. If it wasn't, it was early in the second half, and he really didn't make the most of it. And he needs to, because ultimately he came. Yes, we all accept he came as a very raw, inexperienced player who probably needs a season minimum to adapt to England and English football. But he also came with the price tag, and Daniel saying in his position as good as anything for his age across Europe. They're quite impressive labels to attach to him, and we haven't seen that, bar that Bournemouth League Cup tie against lower league opposition who played a weakened team that night. We haven't seen it. So yeah, it is a massive opportunity for him. But you just think that whenever Dean has needed to shake it up in that area since he's come to the club, it's been Johnny Rowe. It's not been Jolis. He got the chance at Palace, but then, of course, he got took off and Johnny Rowe got his Premier League debut. And more recently, I think back to the Wolves FA Cup tie, I think that the last game, it's not Jolis who's coming off the bench, it's John Rowe. So that tells you that in Dean Smith's mind at the minute, in terms of the pecking order, John Rowe is ahead of Jolis. And again, today even, he said how much him and Craig Shakespeare are impressed with what Jonathan Rowe is doing. So I think the first cab off the rank, if not it's tomorrow, then maybe the Southampton game will be Jonathan Rowe. So if you're Jolis, what can you do other than just keep your head down, work hard in training, convinced that you are ready for another opportunity? And then, of course, as always, cliche as much as it is, but take it in the way that, I'm trying to think of a more pertinent example. I mean, Poyet hasn't really nailed it down, but, at least he's shown enough to continue to get a chance. At least Malou's a good example. There was a lot of question marks around him, but in recent games, Dean Smith has trusted him enough to play him, and that's only through what he's performed, the level he's performed at. So, yeah, you would think it's all there for Jolis, but I just think we only have to go with Dean Smith's approach in recent games, and he's gone with Rowe before Jolis. So I think it'll be Rowe before Jolis again.
Yeah. Well, Craig Brown says, could Hanley be used as a striker because he can head the ball and get on the end of crosses? I think they probably need him at the other end too much for that, but the set pieces clearly are important. Dean Smith has spoken about how important they are, and probably even more so now. It would be very helpful for Hanley and Gibson to weigh in with some goals. Craig Brooks, is the Northwest not affected by Storm Eunice? You boys are brave for driving up there. Liverpool 0, Eunice 1. Anyone got a beach ball? From the forecast, it's not quite as bad up north as it is down south. I mean, really, Norfolk isn't getting the worst of it either, is it? It is obviously pretty blustery out there. And Paddy, you've seen a picture that I shared in our sort of group chat earlier. There's a big old tree come down outside our house, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty of damage around. But we think we're going to be okay. We're just going to assess it carefully before we leave, aren't we? And hope that we're not getting caught up in a load of rush hour traffic and things. Interesting line from Dean, wasn't there, in terms of straight away was asked, are you guys flying up there? And he said, as long as the pilot is happy, then I'm happy. And I don't know if you've seen this YouTube channel, which has been going viral today. There's a guy who films planes landing at Heathrow. He's obviously a bit of a plane spotter or whatever, and his YouTube channel has been getting like 100,000 views, and he's showing the planes coming in and, you know, wobbling in the wind, and they're having to do the almost sideways landing, and it's scintillating / nervous watching. But yeah, they still intend to go on the plane, don't they? But they could always switch to a club coach if needs be. But as long as they get there safe, that's all that's really important at this stage. Otherwise, it was reasonably straightforward, wasn't it, in terms of the fitness things? But Smith revealed that they had a friendly during the week.
They did, and I found out a little bit more. Apparently, they beat Forest 2-0 at the City Ground. There are a few quotes, I think, now, having looked into it, from Steve Cooper, saying essentially that it was a good opportunity for both clubs to maybe run the rule over some of the fringe players. I think Dean went on to say Ozan Kabak played 90 and Matthias played 60. So, we're talking about Jolis. We don't know how many minutes he got, but I think it's safe to assume he would have got a good proportion of time to convince. And, that was an interesting anecdote, really. But ultimately, I mean, Forest are going very well in the Championship, so that's not the worst preparation. And I'm sure that Dean will have got quite a decent amount out of that in terms of, certainly with the post-Adam Idah news, how his mind's going to go. But I just think for this game, and he didn't categorically say Norman was going to start this morning, but you get the sense that he probably will be very close to a start. And other than that, bearing in mind Idah wasn't available last weekend, I don't see a huge amount of changes. I mean, there's an argument: is Max Aarons' long prolonged run as the first choice under threat a little bit? I think that's the debate you could have. I wouldn't be at all surprised if Sam Byram goes in.
Could you see him maybe playing in that circumstance? Because I think Max could well miss out tomorrow. I think Byram, with what he showed at Wolves, do you think there's any chance he'd play Max as the right winger in these circumstances?
I don't see that per se. No, I don't know what signal that sends to your Jolises and Jonathan Rose, even Dowell to a degree. But I can definitely, 100% see Byram starting tomorrow, because I think what that might allow it, and again, this is me hypothesising, but if Norman's coming back into a 3, then somebody needs to drop out. And he also talked, when he got into the Liverpool nuts and bolts of how the game might play out, about how good as any in terms of turning over balls in opposition halves. Liverpool lead that particular metric. He said they need to be good on the ball in their own half. Well, we can debate all day long, as we have done with Gilmour, but he is the best, really, that Norwich have in terms of keeping control of the ball in their own half, playing under pressure. So I don't know whether his mind's just thinking, if you have Byram as a bit of extra protection, you could play Gilmour slightly wider of Norman in the middle and Kenny McLean on the other, which, given, we talked about Lys Malou, that would be a bit harsh on him to drop out. But if he's looking at it and looking at one of Liverpool's strengths and trying to take that away from him a little bit, then you probably want Gilmour in the side. He certainly trusted Gilmour when Man City came to town, so it wouldn't be a huge surprise if he retains his place in the lineup. But no, I wouldn't see Max necessarily playing further forward. But ultimately, Dean Smith has sprung a surprise or two in the past, so you can't completely rule it out. But I just think you go to these type of teams particularly, it's about trying to limit the amount of upheaval or reshuffling that you need to do. There'll be times through injury and illness in the times we live in now where that's out of Dean's hands. But I don't see, personnel-wise or even how they set up, it veering dramatically from what we saw last weekend, because we all know that for an hour or so, maybe not so much an hour, maybe 50 minutes or so, up until the point the second goal went in, Norwich were competitive and they were giving as good as they could get, albeit Man City were dominating in terms of chance creation. But I think there was a platform there which you can now take into this game with maybe dropping Norman into the mix. So that's really an intriguing one for me, what that midfield looks like if Norman's in it moving forward, in terms of not just Liverpool, but let's be honest, the big games to come over the horizon, the Southampton, the Brentfords, the Leeds, and then a bit further on, Newcastle, Burnley, those type of teams come to Carrow Road. There's some massive games ahead, and it won't, as Dean reiterated today, it won't be about what happens at Anfield tomorrow per se, but if Norman comes back in and looks like he's back up to speed, then I think that's massive for the games moving forward.
Yeah, that's a good point for me to mention. Our columnist on, pardon me, on Pink and Plus, the analyst, they dug into the midfield stats this week, and they all reflected pretty well on Norman, as you won't be too surprised to see. And yeah, that comment from Craig Brooks, I was just going to bring up, put Milos on the right and Dimmy on the left. I'd like to see that. Personally, I'd be surprised to see them breaking the Williams and Rashica partnership almost, because it feels like they've got a good rhythm to them now. I was at the fan hub yesterday where they were both signing autographs alongside each other. Sadly, behind plastic screens, the photos were being sort of slightly awkwardly taken through screens, but obviously they have to protect the players at the moment. They need to do it. They need to be avoiding any COVID scares and things like that. So it was sensible, and they were still signing all their autographs and stuff. But Brandon spoke about the sort of understanding and how well they get on and stuff. So another opportunity to mention Pink and Plus there. If you're not already subscribed, $1.99 a month. The full exclusive interview of Brandon Williams is up there. Covered loads of different things with him, including those reports that came out yesterday from The Sun. Slightly odd report. Anonymous source quote saying that Ralph Rangnick had sort of sounded out Williams during the game at Carrow Road in December, when Williams couldn't play, of course, and told him explicitly that he will be playing for Manchester United next season. Now, when I put that to Brandon, he just sort of laughed it off and said it was a false story, because he said we just said hello to each other and that was it. And also, if you think about it a bit more with United, he's stepping up into that sort of technical director role or whatever it is, isn't he? And then there's supposed to be a new head coach coming in. So he couldn't say anything with certainty, and he'd only just taken over at that point as well. So slightly odd story, but in terms of whether he can stay at Norwich and stuff, we can just park all that for now, can't we? Because if Norwich don't stay in the Premier League, there's almost no chance of Brandon Williams being a Norwich player next season. Just a couple of other things to clarify. So Lucas Rupp back in training next week. Andrew Omobamidele has got to see a specialist again about his back. He had that stress fracture. He's still not back to full strength yet, so he's not back involved with things. And I think that's just about it. So a couple of comments I wanted to put your way, Pad. On the back of the Idah news, Stuart Webber will have known what was coming his way. This sort of a comment from David Field. This shows the deterioration of how the club is run. Time for a new 5-year plan, as this is not working year on year. And everyone saw this coming. So in fairness to David, yes, there were a lot of people saying that in January, weren't there? There were plenty of people that would quite happily have seen Hernandez and Hugill back from their loans in with the squad. Some people saying, what does Poeta offer that Hernandez doesn't, and that Hugill can be a sort of perfect backup to them? And of course, if there is injuries, which is now the situation we are in. Now, I suppose the wage bill sort of plays into all that side of things, but ultimately, the decision always left them on a little bit of a knife edge, didn't it? And now they fall on the wrong side of it.
Yeah, but I mean, David will have to come back to us, explain, why that shows the deterioration of the club. Because my mind goes back to when, 2 seasons ago, when they had those issues at centre back with a spate of injuries, Amadou and Stete having to step in, and Webber was getting criticised then. So, ultimately, if you want to look at it through that prism, then fair enough. Yeah, they've been caught out. But, post Everton, when Adam Idah has led the line brilliantly, scored a goal, is anybody saying, why the hell didn't we go out in January and bring a striker in? Don't think so. So, I'm not disputing that now with the current news, and it looks like they've left themselves lacking in cover, albeit, of course, Josh Sargent can do that role. As Dean Smith said, he was brought as a striker, and as we now thankfully have seen at Watford, he can score goals in the Premier League. So if Josh Sargent is the man who steps in there, and then they've got as we discussed, a 10, 11 million pound summer signing to play on the right hand side, then ultimately, we're not dipping into the under 18s to bring players in now to make the numbers up for Norwich. So, I'm inclined to think, ultimately there are options. They did spend money. Yes, they didn't have the money to spend in January. Otherwise, I'm sure they spent it. It was a wad of cash parked in the bank in January, and they just decided, no, we've got enough in the building. We won't go and do anything. Yeah. You can be pretty sure Dean Smith, if Stuart Webber had said there's money available, he'd have said, go and spend it. Go and find me some options. And I'm sure he'd have said maybe at the top end of the pitch. So there's the ideal element of what they'd like to have done, and then there's the reality of what they couldn't do. So, we don't need to get into the looking again forensically at the summer transfer window. The time to judge will be ultimately when we get to the other end of these run of games and the season is finished and we know where Norwich finished, and then we can definitively get into they got it wrong last summer in the window, they got it wrong in January. But I think for now, as I say, we routinely have these debates, certainly in the Premier League, regarding Norwich and what they haven't done and where they've left themselves short. Ultimately, if Josh Sargent returns to a central role and does chip in with goals, then nobody's going to be saying you got it wrong in January. So I guess the jury's out, isn't it, ultimately? But, I'll be interested in what David is alluding to by, the deterioration of the club, and everybody should have seen this coming.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit dramatic, to be honest, David. But that's Stuart Webber's job, isn't it? He sort of lives and dies by the sword, and every decision that goes, well, obviously, if they go down, then Stuart Webber's going to get it in the neck again, isn't it? And he knows that full well. But equally, they, how much is a Premier League striker who's going to score you actual goals? It's a lot of money. People might be able to now point to a few free agents who are about and things like that, but as we know, getting them up to speed fitness-wise and whether they fit into the squad and things like that. I saw someone mention Diego Costa. I mean, he's not the sort of player you chuck into the Norwich squad, is he? And fitness-wise, basically his career has petered out, hasn't it? So we'll see. I guess we will probably ask about that. But ultimately, as you've teed up there, what they really need is for Josh Sargent to go and launch himself through the air, score a Grant Holt-style header at Anfield, and move his career forward as a striker. He did score those goals at Watford. If he can just get off to a decent start in this interim period, when they're looking to play two up front more, maybe the Brentford home game, because you can't see them playing two up front tomorrow, can you, at Liverpool anyway? So it's probably not too much of a panic today. But they need goals from him. That is pretty certain. But they need goals from Pukki as well. He's not scored too many recently, has he? I think it's 1 in 10 or 11 games, something along those lines. But anyway, let's talk Liverpool. Bring you a little bit of a clip from what Dean Smith said this morning. There was a nice little line, wasn't there, about him being a very keen chess player in his younger days and a bit of a sort of schools champion or something along those lines, Dean Smith. So it was put to him whether taking on Jurgen Klopp is taking on a grandmaster.
Yeah.
Bobby's got.
He's certainly got a few more pieces than me at the moment. So there would be an advantage in terms of the quality of players, but our mindset's going to be a really important part of it, and we have to try and outthink where we can. But I saw in the week, it's amazing, what he's done at Liverpool in the time he's been there. I think it's 50 Champions League wins alone now. So yes, we're coming up against the Grandmaster, and I'm really looking forward to it. We had some good battles against him before. Obviously I was at a different club at the time, so it'd be my first with Norwich, and we'll have two in the space of 2 weeks. So we have to come up with some tricks where we can.
Wow, that is remarkable, isn't it? 50 Champions League wins. But we're sort of the same situation as we were a week ago, aren't we? The sort of game we're teeing up here. We know that Norwich are going up against a far superior opponent with far, far more money. They've won 7 on the spin. They won 2-0 at Inter Milan on Wednesday night in the Champions League. All right, they're 9 points behind Manchester City, but that game in hand is against Leeds next midweek, so they could still cut that gap potentially. There could still be a title race on their hands, and that probably emphasises just how good Manchester City are, because Liverpool have only lost twice in the league all season. They haven't lost at Anfield for almost a year. they are an exceptional team. I was looking at the stats. One little bit of good news for Norwich. Diogo Jota has been ruled out. He picked up an ankle injury on Wednesday night. He's got 18 goals so far this season. But Salah, if I'm remembering these numbers correctly, has 24 in 28 games so far this season. Norwich have scored 22 goals in all competitions this season, including the 6-0 against Bournemouth. So, Pad, what are the chances?
Of what, Dave? Yeah, I've enjoyed our time in Merseyside. Well, I always like hearing on the ball. I always like hearing "You'll Never Walk Alone." That's a particularly special moment. Yeah. My mind goes back
you
to
might not be able to hear it over the wind.
Well, yeah, there is that. But that Friday prior to the start, well, the curtain raiser 2 seasons ago, and that was Liverpool's first game since winning the European Cup a couple of months before, and that was a sight to behold that night. So yeah, I always enjoy that. I don't tend to enjoy. Although my team have won at Anfield more recently than Norwich have. So that yeah, in the FA Cup a few years back. Yeah, I think Dion was still playing, so that's how far back we're going. But I've just had a look there. The lad they brought in the summer to emphasise the point about resource. In January, the Portuguese player Diaz, 38 million. That's getting on for maybe 2/3 of what Norwich spent in the entirety of the summer, and he's on the bench midweek against Inter Milan and comes on for the last half an hour. So they're in the same bracket as Man City. They are on a different planet, footballing wise, and that's not just to Norwich. That's to the majority of the teams in this league. So very hard, let's be honest, to construct a case that Norwich can get something there. But it is football, and the fact that they're in this kind of run, they played midweek in Milan. They had a very tough game there. Yes, they ran out winners, but by no means was that all their own way. And they were made to work for that. They've got Norwich this weekend, then they've got that Leeds game, and then they go into the League Cup final, Man City away. And then they have Norwich the following midweek in the FA Cup. So, yes, they have some enviable resource, but as you said, Jota's unavailable, and they're gonna have to be Klopp's gonna have to be very careful how he manages it through this period, because they are going for so many different competitions. So, these are all crumbs that Norwich would hope to cling to. The fact that they've had a full week essentially to prepare for this game, and they've not been in, travelling here, there, and everywhere, bar a trip to the City ground. But ultimately, it will be for Liverpool to come off their whichever 11 take the pitch for them. It'll be for them to come off their levels, and Norwich, it's safe to say, performing better than they've done at any point this season for a sustained period. It won't be enough to go with them for 20, 25 minutes. They'll need to try and maintain it for the duration. And, really think if there's any prospect of them getting anything, they need to score first. If it goes the other way, then I think we all know what the outcome is going to be ultimately. And that's not being defeatist, that's being realistic. Because they are, along with Man City right now, on a different plane to the rest of English football. No doubt about it.
Absolutely. And Dean Smith said quite a few times today, didn't he, about you can't make mistakes. And that is what Max Aarons ended up doing against Manchester City, wasn't it? He just lost his concentration for a split second. There's a ball that he should clear, and then there you go, Sterling puts it in the top corner. You just cannot afford to make one mistake against those guys, can you? But someone like Salah, he's one of the best players in the world, isn't he? So there's an element of, which I tried to do last weekend, of enjoying it, of seeing the top level players, and just, for all, I felt Norwich put in all the basics most of the time last week. They worked really hard. They played a lot better than in the 5-0 away from home. But just the way that those top players move the ball, their movement off the ball, how accurate their passing is and sharp, you can just see the difference in quality between the teams right at the very top and the rest, sadly. So we shall see, but we'll try and enjoy it as much as we can. I think that just about covers everything. So we'll crack on with getting everything ready for tomorrow's Pinken. 12 pages in the papers tomorrow, of course, and keep it locked on Pinken Plus. We'll be making our way up as we usually do for these games on the Northwest. We're staying on the M6 in Staffordshire, so to sort of cut the journey, so it's not quite such a long day tomorrow. So we've got to make our way up there this afternoon as well. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and do catch up with us on Pinken Plus during the day tomorrow.